You're likely missing a ton of value with your nuts. Especially on boards like this, you can just barrel through and have your opponent call down any ace, right? Well, not really. Playing your nuts can feel easy, because you just rarely lose the hand. But even though winning 50 big blinds can feel very nice, if you could have won 100 big blinds instead, you just lost out on 50 big blinds. And in the long run, that will massively impact your win rate. That's why perfecting the way you play your nuts is one of the most important parts in poker. And spoiler alert, betting them is not always the best play. In this hand, Ignacio Moron, aka Nacho, 3-bets jacks against Barack Whisper's open raise, who then calls. The flop is what we all dream of, and Nacho starts out with a 20% pot bet, which is a good choice for an ace-high flop. In theory, we could bet 75% of our range here. Our opponent would rarely fold, and the turn is a pretty blank 5. So here we definitely want to continue barreling and get value from these ace-x hands, smaller pairs and draws. And so, man, you just said in the intro that you don't want to always bet your nuts. Do you think they're stupid enough to fall for this cheap trap? Well, okay, sorry, alright. I just wanted to add some surprise element. I mean, is that
it's not surprising.
Well, okay, before you just barrel off here, you want to look ahead. What can you expect to happen on the turn and on the river? In GTO, we can see that jacks would mix bets and folds, so most of the time they would be betting. However, our combo of jack of spades, jack of clubs mixes bets and checks pretty much 50-50, because apparently having a bit less EV when we don't have the jack of diamonds incentivizes us to check a little bit more often and play a little bit more passive. But how do we decide what we should do in practice and what the best approach would be in practice? Well, this is the point where we want to play Pac-Man. What? Huh. Now that was surprising, wasn't it? Well, let me explain. Imagine you're Pac-Man and you have two options where to go, up or down. However, look at this guy. From his point of view, all he sees is this. He has no idea whether going up or down is the better option. When you're inside the game and have a decision in the hand, this is your point of view if you have no clue of what happens in either case. So how do we change that? Well, the best way is to know your opponent's tendencies. If they're a calling station, for example, which is often the case in recreational players who just call down pairs a lot, then you know you can value bet a lot more often with your nuts. But if you face an aggressive opponent, you might consider checking and having them put more money in the pot when they bet. The problem is just when you don't know anything about your opponent, which happens most often on mid stakes and below, because player pools are just bigger than on high stakes, and you don't encounter the same opponents as often as you do on higher stakes. Here, the solution, or one solution, is to rely on population data. Population data tells you how the average player in a pool plays, and by analyzing that data, you get a very good idea of how they play. In this spot, betting or checking are both fine in GTO. But that assumes our opponent also plays GTO in every node. In reality, it's important to know how population plays in two nodes here, when they're faced with a bet and when they're faced with a check. And in 3-bet pots in position, when faced with a bet on the turn on an ace-high board, the average player overfolds against the bet. Which means for us, bluffs become more profitable. But it also means value bets become less profitable, as they don't get paid as often as they should. So is checking the better option? Well, for that we also want to look at what population does when we check. Because if they bet significantly less often than GTO, then checking our value hands is not better than just betting them. But if they play close to GTO against a check, or bet even more often than GTO, checking value is exploitatively the better option. And what data shows is that against a check, population does bet even more often than GTO, which makes checking our value hands the perfect exploit on mid-stakes and below. Now for a complete estimation, we also have to look at what happens on the river. And when the average opponent faces a third barrel on the river, they also overfold. While when they bet the turn themselves and have to decide whether to bet the river as well, they play a frequency close to GTO. Which means even considering the river, checking the turn is still the best exploit for our value hands. If you want to have this information about your games as well, to turn your point of view from a clueless Pac-Man looking at a wall to a player who can consciously navigate to the lines that feed you the most, then GTO to exploit helps you do exactly that. In my membership Made to Perfect Your Exploit game, you get daily articles that show you exactly where your opponents overfold or overbet, and how you can find the best plays against your player pool and punish their mistakes. Check it out in the first link below. And if you want to know where you can exploit your opponents by being aggressive and what to avoid, watch this video next.